Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jamie Schenker-Bracero. I'm the Associate Director of the Temple Small Business Development Center. You are here for our Custom Relations Management presentation. And what we have on the screen now is a poll that I will close so we can see what sort of knowledge we have about this in our attendees today. So most of you, almost 70%, said that you do not have a CRM, which is great. That means that you are in the right place because we're certainly going to be talking about what it is, why it's important, and how you can start small, how you can start easy with coming up with the system on your own. So at the Temple FBDC, we help small businesses start and grow. So we do that by offering no-cost consulting for small businesses. And we also have virtual programming like this one. And I'll put a link in the chat for our resource page, which is collecting information about resources in response to COVID-19 for your business. It also includes links to our upcoming webinars and a library of previous webinar recordings. You can check that out. Today we're joined by Derek Gibbs, who is a Temple alum, and we put this together in response to a need that we've seen at our office for just a super important tool that can be as simple as you need, or for larger companies, this gets very, very complex. But it really, the important part is it can be customized for you and your needs. And it is just, oh my goodness, it is just a really important tool. So we are going to have everybody muted. And if you have questions, please post them in the chat and we will get to them. And I think, let me close out the poll and I'll pass the floor to Derek. We really appreciate his time today and we've been very excited for this presentation. So thank you, Derek.
Absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, Jamie. I think this is a really great topic to cover. I'll get into a little bit of my background, but this is an area that, I have a lot of experience in and I've seen firsthand how big of an impact it can make for all types of businesses, really big and really small. So what I want to go into just to start is kind of walk you guys through an agenda of what we're going to try and cover today. I know it seems like a lot, but I promise we'll get through it. And of course, welcome any questions that you guys have along the way. If it's something that it seems like I might be able to respond to just as I'm talking through, I'll try and answer it, as we're going through some of the content, or maybe it's something that we might save for, more of like a Q&A session at the end. So before I get into kind of the details of what we're going to be reviewing, Jamie already started to get into it. Who is this for, and who do we think is going to get the most out of it? And fortunately, from the poll, it seems like you guys have kind of self-selected into the perfect audience, which is great. For me, that I think this is going to be really valuable. Most of you seem like you're aware of, at least at a high level, what a CRM is, but maybe don't have one yet, or don't have one that's really well defined. So, what I'd like to do is, as we go through, start with the basics, which I think most people should be pretty comfortable with or well aware of, but we all need a little bit of a refresher sometimes, and then start going through how we can take the basics of customer relationships and customer management and actually apply that into potentially putting together a customer relationship management system, and some CRMs that are out there that might be able to fit your needs, kind of depending on where you are, in terms of size and maturity, and also things that are free that might be able to be really useful for you. So you can take a look at the agenda here. We're going to start with the basics. We're going to walk through. I promise we'll get through it, and hopefully you get a lot out of it. So why don't I go ahead and get started? And also, Jamie, as an open invitation, I know, like, obviously you've seen a lot of this in the past, and you have a lot of experience, and I encourage you to jump in anywhere that you think you might have a good point to make. Don't feel feel free to interrupt me or jump in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a little bit about me, just to kind of set some context. So I'm a technology and management consultant at a large consulting firm. Some of you may be familiar. It's pretty big, PricewaterhouseCoopers. But I actually graduated from Temple University's Fox School of Business a few years ago. And since then, I've been working at PwC within their sales and marketing transformation practice, really helping enterprises transform the way that they connect with their customers, the way that they engage in sales, the way that they handle commercial activities, in really interesting ways and really cool ways. And a lot of that is enabled by customer relationship management systems. They're so powerful as tools to sort of codify and enable your customer journeys, that they're pretty much ubiquitous, at least at the enterprise level. But I think there's a lot of opportunity and applicability, for small businesses as well, especially since there's so many fantastic tools that are out there that are actually free to use, at least for, small groups of users. And so, I kind of want to share that with everyone here and hopefully give everyone a background of how it could be useful to you. Kind of on top of that, I'm really excited to be giving this presentation, obviously through the Small Business Development Center at Temple. It's always fantastic to kind of give back and be plugged into the community that served me so well during my time in Philadelphia. And I also actually do pro bono consulting services for small businesses, particularly through a program called Small Business Strong right now that's focused in the Boston area. But small business is something that I grew up in. It's, I guess, something that chose me and not necessarily that I chose it. So I have a lot of respect for small business owners and appreciate all the hard work that you guys do and know how challenging it can be. So hopefully anything that I can do, or information that I can provide today that's gonna, help you on your journey, it will be a win. So, so let's get into it. The place that I wanted to start is kind of, a little bit of a refresher on the customer basics, right? What's a background? How can we think about, our customers and the way that we engage with them in a way that, maybe we can translate to a system later on, right? So as you all know, without customers, there is no business, right? So they're fundamental to, everything that we do. And sometimes, very little is paid attention to them, right? Sometimes, companies do a great job of engaging them and thinking critically about the way that they're interacting with their customers. But it's one of those things that it's so obvious that it can sometimes kind of get, fall into the background because, surely, who your customers are and how you want to interact with them. So what I want to walk you through right now is, a little bit of a few of the basics and some of the important things that I think are critical to consider that will eventually be very relevant to how you utilize a customer relationship management system. So starting with, a customer strategy, right? Understanding who your target customers even are, right? How are, based on the product or service that you're wanting to provide, who are you actually intending to provide that to? And that is, heavily related to, your marketing, understanding, what the kind of customer segment that you're trying to address, trying to get information on who you're servicing, based on, let's say, the community that you're operating in, and understanding, the actual customer profile, even at a demographic level that you're trying to target and serve. And this is really important, especially for small businesses, because it forces you to focus in on the customers and the people that are going to be the best fit for your product or service, which, given that, so many small businesses are constrained with, resources or time and energy and attention, being as focused as possible on who you're intending to serve is going to be critical. And you'll see how that actually carries down through the rest of this customer, life cycle and customer journey. The first part being, how do you, go from identifying your customers to actually acquiring them and converting them? So that's where we get into customer acquisition. What is the way that you connect with your prospects in order to eventually, arrive at sales or, kind of foster that relationship for a sale in the future? And that's a lot of the actual marketing execution, the way that you manage your leads, if you even have leads, how you manage, any inbound activities like people calling in or, scheduling appointments, or outbound activities like, sending an email or a direct mailer or some other type of advertising. So, this is why having a customer strategy is very important, and knowing who you're trying to target. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to acquire everyone as a customer, right? And you can't really have a target everyone as a customer. You have to be a little bit more focused, and that's going to drive where you engage your focus and activities for customer acquisition. And hopefully, if everything goes well and you're able to engage with your customers, then you're going to be able to provide your product or service to them. And you'll notice here, it's not just about sales, but I also mentioned experience, which we'll get into a little bit, later on. But the way that you provide your product or service, the quality of it, the way that the customer feels as they're engaging with you, and in the sale and after the sale is really important. And I'm going to want to talk about that as well. And that's where there's a ton of opportunity for sort of having a fine control over the way that you interact with your customers. And then the last part is obviously, customer retention. Everyone wants to, if you work so hard to get customers, you want them to come back, whether it's a product that they're going to continue to purchase from you, or maybe a service that they kind of get from you regularly. Fortunately, a lot of the times quality and, and a positive experience, as you provide it to your customers is usually enough to get them to come back, right? But there's more that you can do beyond just, providing a quality product or service that's going to help this, and a CRM is going to be able to support that. So what I want to do now is say, like, if this is a customer journey, how can we put it into context? And I apologize if it's a little bit basic. I did want to make sure that we're all kind of starting from a similar foundation and understanding, and hopefully it's not too redundant or repetitive for what you guys are already familiar with. But I did want to put it into an example. Let's say for a barbershop. In fact, while I was at Temple, I frequently went to Ed's barbershop in Philadelphia, which you can see a picture of on the right, and I enjoyed my time going there. But if you look at this from kind of a customer life cycle and put it into context, what would a barbershop might maybe thinking about across these 4 pillars, right? So one, if we're saying who's my target customer going to be, what are the demographics in my area, right, in the community that I am and the market that I'm operating in, and how can I sort of further segment that into the kind of prime candidates for who I'm trying to reach out to or who I'm trying to convert as a customer. And in many cases in Philadelphia, like as a city with fantastic colleges that are embedded right into the city. A lot of barbershops or similar businesses might be targeting college students or young professionals who've recently graduated, but went there as a student, right? So understanding, you're probably not going to be targeting, full families if you're in a city versus if you're in a suburb. You're probably not going to be targeting, super highly, affluent or retired folks if you're in kind of a hole in the wall in the city. So which is not a bad thing. It's just trying to be focused on who you're addressing. And so how can we take our understanding of our kind of desired target customer into the way that we actually engage with them in order to acquire them? So if we know that our target customers are college students or young professionals kind of that live in the area, that go to school there or work there, what are ways that we can actually focus our efforts and energy around marketing and lead generation so that we have the best chance of acquiring them, right? So, one thing that I, had seen work even on me is to say, maybe there's a coffee shop that's a few blocks down that, I used to go to study, right? And there was actually a promotion or even just a flyer, right, that said, hey, there's a fantastic barbershop that's just a few blocks away. If you're interested, you can call at this number to schedule an appointment. And that's what I did, right? So, the simple kind of marketing material as a flyer, if well placed and well positioned, can be really effective and drive a lot of value for your small business. But again, that same flyer might not, have the same impact if it's put, in a different place or it's not really targeted to the right people. In my case, a coffee shop where I'm going to be studying maps really well to sort of college students as a customer, target customer. And it worked really well for me, and it probably worked really well for a lot of other people as well. And then in terms of, I called in, I scheduled an appointment, eventually I got seated and was provided the service or got a haircut. And the way that you actually deliver that service and the way that you even position everything around your product or service is really important. And that, that kind of opens an entire can of worms around, how you actually put together your product or service, which we won't necessarily cover today. But what is important to understand is that, that entire process is an experience, and the nature of that experience is going to inform, my perception of the company going forward or the business going forward, and it's going to drive whether I come back, whether I leave a positive review. So in my case, when I went and got my haircut here, it was awesome. It was a fantastic experience. I got there, I sat down. They said it was going to be a little bit of a wait. They said we have some beers in the fridge if you would like one. And I said, hey, as a college student, it's a mid-afternoon. That sounds fantastic, and it's something that I remember to this day. And it was a very kind of like fun and positive experience for me. And I kept going back throughout the rest of my time there. And so there's certain aspects where your customers might return and come back just from the nature of the experience alone, or you can be a little bit more strategic in having some type of loyalty program or some type of reward for coming back multiple times in a row or spending a certain amount. And so there's a lot that can be done there. So if you take kind of this entire customer journey, what I really want to call out is this concept of customer experience, right? And some of you might not be familiar with that term. Some of you may be familiar because it's been picking up a lot of attention and focus in the past few years. But the idea is that every interaction that a customer has with you and your company is going to impact their perception of you and your company. So that's what they see online whenever they're looking up restaurants near them, or the reviews that they see, how it feels or how it sounds whenever they call in and you pick up the phone and you respond to them, the amount of time it takes them for to get serviced, or that they're waiting before they can get seated. Everything about the interactions that they have with you is informing sort of their concept of the experience they've had. And more businesses are realizing that customer experience is incredibly important. And that's especially true in places where experience can be a differentiator, right? If it's not necessarily, if it's not a necessity, right? Not everyone is going to be selling toilet paper or internet connection. And if you think about internet connection, think about how positive your experience might have been with Comcast recently, right? Especially as basically a necessity. And so think about customer experience in the case of services or products or restaurants or barbershops is incredibly important for whether or not that customer is going to come back, whether or not they're going to recommend you to their friends. And you can see that here quantified in some pretty unbelievable metrics. I mean, if you look on the left-hand side, there were kind of a pair from some research from Qualtrics saying 94% of customers who kind of self-reported that they had a positive experience with the company said that they would purchase more. I mean, think about that. It's almost 100% of people. They say, if I have a positive experience, I'm going to want to come back. I'm going to want to purchase more. I'm going to, get another haircut. I'm going to want to purchase another meal from you guys. And the flip side is, of the same kind of population, 20% of customers who had a negative experience, would purchase more. So there's a huge gap between, the impact of retention and kind of future growth just on the customer experience alone, right? I mean, if you have 10 customers and, your experience isn't up to par, you're only going to be retaining 2 of them on a good day, right? It might not be any. And so there's definitely a downside to not paying enough attention to customer experience and understanding the impact that it can have on your business. But I want to point out that it's not just a downside risk that you have to mitigate. There is significant upside potential as well, which is people are willing to pay more for a positive experience, even if the quality of the underlying product or underlying service is basically the same. A lot of people, and I'm sure we can argue, you can argue on this, but for most people that aren't particularly picky, especially college students, most haircuts can probably be viewed somewhat as a I mean, most people have relatively skilled barbers. They can do a good job. They can take instruction on what they're looking for. But the experience that a customer has in doing that, can significantly drive their willingness to, one, come back and kind of engage more with your business, and also how much they're actually willing to pay for that. I know, personally, everyone, now, and myself as kind of most guilty of it, is looking for things that are convenient, that are quick, that are even potentially, fun or exciting. And, I'm willing to pay more for experiences that are going to provide that over, an equivalent product or an equivalent quality that doesn't. And a lot of other people are as well. And, so there's a huge potential upside for focusing on customer experience. And not to scare everyone again, right? But the tolerance for, inconsistency in experience or poor experiences, I think is decreasing, every year and every day. The fact that there's so much information that's visible to find alternatives, the fact that information can be shared so freely about negative experiences, when someone posts on Twitter that they had a terrible experience. And 60% of people in the US responded, they would stop interacting or purchasing from brands that they previously loved after several bad experiences. And so that's pretty scary, right? If you can only mess up so many times or not pay enough attention to it so many times before customers, even loyal customers, are going to start falling away. So what does that mean, as a small business, right? So maybe you might think this is kind of the realm of large enterprises. This is the realm of these big Fortune 500 corporations. How am I supposed to act on this? Like, what does it mean for me as a small business? And the reality is, as a small business, you're going to have to make some tough decisions about what to do with your time and your resources and your energy. And there's a lot of things that are out there and things that people are trying to sell to you that sound really exciting and sound really flashy and promises to solve all of your problems, but most of the time and most likely they will not. And you're kind of just being sold. And the foundation of a high quality customer experience and a journey that a customer is going to be going through with you really starts at the basic levels, right? It kind of starts at the kind of 4 pillars we saw before, which is you need to have a great understanding of who your customers are, how you're going to acquire them, and how you're going to tailor the experience and the way that you engage and interact with them throughout that entire process in order to provide a positive experience. And that's where something like a customer relationship management system can come in. And beyond the system, actually customer relationship management as a set of processes or as a strategy or as a way of thinking is also critically important. So what I want to get into now is kind of the basics of customer relationship management. When we say that, what do we mean? And what are the kind of fundamental building blocks of customer relationship management? And at its most basic, customer relationship management is just a way of tracking, your customers or your prospective customers and information about them, right? I mean, even to some extent, the contacts list in your phone, if you recorded customers in there, could be a basic CRM, right? I mean, who they are, how you would reach out to them if you wanted to. You might have some information about them sort of saved in notes, and that's really, it's no more complicated than that in terms of the function that it plays. But we can go far beyond that in terms of how we utilize a CRM or some software or some tools to hone the journey that a customer goes through when they're encountering your business, or even if you're a little bit of a larger business, maybe you have a team of people, or maybe you have other salespeople, or if you're in retail, you might have some employees that they're going to be the ones interacting with customers, right? So the value of a CRM kind of grows exponentially once you need to replicate an experience that you're wanting to provide to your customer kind of beyond yourself, right? You can make assurances to yourself or have kind of levels of quality that you're going to provide to them in terms of attention, in terms of responsiveness, but it's hard to sort of make other people care in the same way as you do as a small business owner. And so something like a CRM can be helpful for sort of codifying that and putting it into a system where it can scale. So if you look on the right-hand side, there's 3 key areas that I'll walk through, that I think, again, kind of my perspective on, what a CRM is and how you would do it sort of sequentially, because there's value to be realized in each of the blocks as you go through. So there's value to be realized just from block one. And then block two builds on block one, but even blocks 1 and 2, kind of have some value in and of themselves. So if you look here, the first block is just having, customer data and information. So even just having, a table or an Excel sheet or some level of information around who your customers are or who your prospects are, how you would contact them, and potentially some information about them, whether demographic or notes from a call. That's going to be really, really important and really critical and inherently valuable. Not only for your current processes, but anything you want to build on top of that or anything you want to automate later on. The second is, the interactions and engagement of those customers with you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Really quickly, I think it could be interesting. So now that people know what the basics of a CRM really consist of, I know we had about 70% of the respondents saying that they didn't have a CRM, but I'm curious to see, by a show of hands, you can press that button, if any of our businesses have something that they didn't realize was a CRM, but they actually have a spreadsheet or something where they're capturing basic information of their customers. So you can go ahead and raise your hands if that applies to you, and maybe you didn't realize that you're capturing information, and what we talk about today can help you maybe capture the information more efficiently, or maybe add a few columns to your spreadsheet, for example, so you're gathering a little bit more than what you're doing now. Okay, so a few, but still, it seems like most people aren't gathering that. Okay, that's good to know. Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great to know, and again, that's a fantastic starting point. And if you already have something like an Excel sheet or even notes on customers, that's gonna kind of bridge a lot of the gap to adapting it to maybe a more kind of formal or specialized software or tool. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well.
Because step one really has to be the habit, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, step one has to be you have to spend that 30, 60 seconds to do this. And we'll talk later about potential automations and things like that. But, if you're using the super basic tools like Google Drive or Excel, you have to get into that habit. And so the sooner you do that, even before your business really takes off and maybe you're just doing family and friends, that's a great time to just get into this very, very good business habit of taking down the information. Because once you get bigger, it is a lot harder to backtrack and say, wait a minute, what was that sale that I made last year, right? And once that information is gone, it's a lot harder to track it.
That's absolutely right, Jamie. I think a lot of this, especially getting started, is about the kind of, good habits or good, business hygiene around collecting this information. And if you can start to do that, and one, it becomes really easy to start to translate, any habits you have into rules and automations into your CRM, which makes your life a lot easier. But even before then, there's a ton of value into collecting, any information you have on your customers and the way that you interact with them. So if you're, for those of you that said you had kind of maybe something that you didn't realize was a CRM, that's great. Continue to do that, and we'll talk about it. For those of you that didn't raise your hand, I would highly encourage you to consider, trying to get into that habit, or hopefully taking away some of the practical tips we'll get into in the coming pages to maybe start that, because it's going to be very valuable for you.
And you'll hear from our office, we'll always talk about the business plan, or at least the elements that go into a business plan and how important it is to think about those things. And part of it, like we discussed, is your target demographic. And you can conceptualize it and get that down on paper in a business plan or whatever format. But isn't it great to then have the data to back that up and say, wait a minute, I'm looking at my CRM for the past quarter. I was thinking that my target demographic is men in their 30s, but really it's men from 18 to 25. And I kind of didn't realize that my product is doing better there. I need to adjust. I need to adjust how I market, because that's not who I thought my client, that's not what is actually happening. So it really lets you verify your assumptions.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think, that's something, that's even another kind of inherent value to recording this information, is that, you're going to want to go back and sort of, adjust your assumptions around what your business model might be or what your business plan is. Because when you first create it, it's always, it's a best guess, right? But once you start to get, some actual data around who are my customers, who's purchasing, what's effective and what's not, you can kind of refine that over time. And Jamie, it sounds like, the Small Business Development Center has some resources to help people kind of get comfortable with that. Awesome. So that's fantastic, and I think that's definitely take to heart some of Jamie's comments there, because I think there's a lot of value in what she's saying and the habits around collecting this information. But what I wanted to do is kind of block 1 and block 2 and block 3 and interactions and engagement and all that. You might be nodding now and say, yeah, that I get it, but it might not be something that immediately sticks. It might not be something that you're going to be thinking about even by later today. So what I wanted to do is kind of put this into a framework that I actually think significantly simplifies it and kind of uses actually the term in and of itself, right? So when we say customer relationship management, what does that mean and how does that relate to sort of the fundamental building blocks and sequence that we want to address it? So, at the risk of being a little, campy, the idea here is that, customer relationship management kind of provides you all the information you need in the term itself, as far as what you're actually going to, need to utilize, and maybe the order of operations for how you should go about implementing a CRM, or building yours out further if you already have one. So the idea here is that, the customer part of it, of the term, is getting an understanding of who your customers are, information about them. The relationship part of the term is understanding, what is that customer's relationship, to you and to your business and to your sales team? What are the interactions and engagements you've had with them, whether it's phone calls or emails or previous purchasing history or expressed interest, or, that a marketing email reached them, but they didn't click on it. All that information about the way that they engage with your business is the relationship, is a relationship aspect of it. Right? And the third part, which we haven't touched on as much, is to say, how can you take the information you have about your customers, the information that you have about the relationship those customers have to your business, and actually, manage it, right? And apply some process and control over the experience. So that might be looking like in defining a sales process, right? To say, here are the stages that I know my customers are going to go through, or here's the journey that they're going to go through. What am I trying to focus on as they go through that journey? Or what are the key activities that are really that I've noticed make a difference in whether or not they go from a lead to an actual customer to actually coming back, every 2 weeks, right? So, so that's kind of the way that I think you should think about it, and just think about it in terms of, there's 3 components. There's the customer component, there's the relationship component, there's the management component, and all 3 of those together kind of comprise customer relationship management. And you can kind of think about it in terms of stacking the blocks in that order. So we just got a question. Let me just take a look at it really quickly and see if I can respond to it. Yeah, so there's a good question here about, collecting information.
So, Derek, people are asking about how to gather.
Yep. So it's a great question. There's really, you want to think critically about what information is going to be actually valuable to, driving some type of change or decision in your business. So you make a great point, especially now, privacy and the information that we share is a commodity, right? And something people are considering more closely. And so it might be a little off-putting to sort of blanket request a bunch of, demographic information, like asking if someone's married or not married, right? That might not come across in the most positive way. So, but a lot of times people, especially in the case of age, a great way to do that, especially if you're in like a retail environment or like a service environment, is, you can ask people for their birthday, and provide some type of gift or some type of complimentary service, whenever it's their birthday, right? and people kind of are a little bit receptive to that. They'll get maybe a free latte, maybe they'll get a free haircut, and you know, there's the levels that you can apply with that, because obviously you could still do that without collecting the year, in which case it's not as effective. But you know, there's certain ways that you can sort of build in the data that you're collecting so that you can sort of provide a value back to the customer, you know, in the case of age. So hopefully that answers, you know, your question or provides an example. But it is a really good thing to consider. You should be very careful about the data that you do request from your customers, because that can actually have, you know, a negative impact, right? You know, sometimes you just want to purchase something, you know, and you're at a retail store and they ask you for, you know, all of your information and your whole life story, right? And you're like, that's kind of a net negative experience for me if they do that. When in reality, they want that information to tailor it to me. So it's a really good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and Derek, I added, if you are having client interactions, you know, whether you're at a farmer's market or you have a brick and mortar, you could kind of do your best guess with some demographics, and that it'll still be better than nothing. You know, age range, things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, you know, there's ways that you can back into it. And I think the other question was around, you know, there are tools that are out there that, you know, can sort of scrape leads from the web. And I think, you know, some of them are free, most of them are paid. And that's one way to do it. But there's a lot of ways that you can kind of generate leads, you know, naturally just from the community. And I would, you know, encourage you to explore all of that. So this is the way I think, you know, we should think about it. We're going to touch kind of the customer component of CRM, right? So I kind of stole a little bit of my own thunder in talking about this, but understanding, you know, the first block is customer information, and understanding who your customers are, you know, maybe some information about them. Also, you know, who your prospective customers are, and that relates to sort of your target audience and target demographic. And then you know, how would you contact them? How would you reach them? So a few practical tips on this. You know, it's going to be dependent on the type of business that you have. But, you know, you should utilize a lot of tools now, kind of do this for you, especially point of sale systems, you know, automatically tracks customer purchasing, you know, especially if there's some type of loyalty program. You know, the expectation is that, you know, a customer is providing some of their information, whether it's a phone number or an email or a birthday, kind of in exchange for some, you know, to be for some additional service or perk as part of a loyalty program. And a lot of point of sale systems do that automatically or support that automatically, as well as track all of your purchasing history. Excuse me. And, you know, that's something, it's a great start for at least keeping track of the transaction data from your customers. And then you might be able to connect it back to a spreadsheet you might have around, you know, who they are, what their demographics are, whether you've engaged with them before, right? If you don't have something like that, then you can use something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet to collect customer information, right? And also track interactions, which we'll get to a little bit later. Jamie, remind me, I know, you know, we had put together kind of a quick start sort of Excel template that they could potentially use as a very rough CRM. Is that something that they have to go through the Small Business Development Center to get? Is it something we'll be sending out?
Well, we can send that out as an attachment follow-up in the follow-up email.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So you know, in the case of point 2 here, we've already kind of put some thinking onto, you know, what that might look like from an Excel template, and obviously you can make it your own. But that, you know, even that, you know, in my mind is a CRM, and it can be a very effective one, just if you get into the habit of collecting that information. And to Jamie's point earlier, you know, developing a habit of, you know, maintaining that customer data, you know, regularly. You know, I say potentially weekly. That's pretty intense, right? If they're not a, you know, high frequency transaction type of business. But the idea, you know, maintaining it regularly allows you to keep a pulse on, you know, again, who is your product or service actually resonating with? You know, who's actually purchasing, you know, when, and what are the characteristics of those that are purchasing? Because you might need to use that to refine your marketing. You might need to use that to refine your business model, et cetera. And the last piece is, you know, I guess it's somewhat practical, but, you know, a lot of times there's ways to integrate, if you have a point of sale system, into some CRM software, even if you're using it for free. And that's a very, very powerful way of connecting all of the information that is basically generated automatically just from your business operations, and relating that to customer information and engagement and calls, then you start to get a little bit more visibility into the full view and picture of, you know, how a customer is interacting with you. So those are a few of the you know, practical tips or quick and dirty tips for how you should approach, you know, your customer data and information.
Do call your Square customer service. Do call Square customer service and find out what they can track, what they do track, add-ons. Even if there is a paid add-on, it could really be worth it and save you a lot of time.
Yep. Yep. And one thing that I think, you know, I glossed over a little bit is, you know, if you're spending, you know, on marketing today and you don't have a really good handle on, you know, CRM or who your customers are, I would challenge you to think through that a little bit, right? Because right now, you know, without a great understanding of who your customers are and whether you've validated your target, you know, audience and demographic, you might be kind of throwing marketing out into the wind kind of as a scattershot, right? Rather than being a little bit more tailored and precise around, you know, what's going to be most effective. So if you're already spending on marketing, but you don't have a CRM, you know, I would think through, you know, maybe there is an actual business case for purchasing that add-on, for, you know, even purchasing for a few licenses of a like a, you know, entry-level CRM software. And then kind of once you collect that information, using it to refine your marketing and going from there. I think what you'll find is most of the time,
you can think about it as part of your marketing budget.
Exactly. Yep. So building on that, you know, the marketing that you do execute, right, and the way that you interact, whether it's, you know, a direct email or a direct mailer or a poster that you put up, anything around, you know, marketing and anything that a customer might see is a part of this overall relationship and interaction that a customer is going to have with your company, right? So don't think, you know, that your relationship with a customer is only when they're, you know, when they're in the store or with you face to face. You know, your relationship with that customer extends, you know, into anything that you're putting out into the world that they might see, even, you know, to some degree of you know, consideration, even the information that you put out, you know, independent of your business, or, you know, that are related to, you know, to you personally, you know, that can be a way that, you know, customers have a perception of what your business is like based on, you know, all of these other things that are around you. So make sure you take a very holistic view of, you know, what does a relationship mean when you're thinking about your customers. So, you know, getting a full view of all the touch points and interactions and engagement that they have sort of horizontally, because it's helpful to understand, you know, in a time-based view, you know, what was the sequence at which they sort of, you know, interacted with your customer, with your company, especially if they're someone that eventually became a customer, because there might be something to learn there about what, you know, kind of optimal path might be, right? If all of a sudden, you know, a lot of your customers are coming through a particular, you know, website or click through from marketing that you put on a website, and then there's a certain journey that's happening there, that's something that's really valuable to know, right? Because you can focus more of your efforts in areas that are going to actually drive results rather than kind of spreading it out evenly across everything. So understanding, you know, who has engaged with you before, whether it was just responding to an email, even opening up an email that you sent out, picking up a call, maybe they called you because they wanted to ask a question or just had some, you know, wanted to get some information about your company. You know, have you sold to them? You know, if you haven't sold to them, do you know what they're looking for? All of this information around this kind of broad view of relationship is really important. And kind of on the practical tip side, again, even if you don't have a CRM, but you have something like an Excel file, and in the template that we've included, we've kind of separated out, you know, your customer data and your customer list of, you know, these are the people that I've engaged with or want to engage with, or are prospects. And then also, you know, a running log of, you know, all the ways that you interact with them, right? And so when you see the template that, you know, once we send it out, you'll notice that, you know, as an option, you can sort of log a call or an email or whatever your interaction might be with a customer that's coming from your sort of, you know, master list of customers there. And it's just a way, you know, even again in Excel, you know, if you get into the habit of tracking your customers and your interactions, you can always just filter down to say, what has been my full journey with this one customer, right? Like, how have they interacted with me before? oh, I can tell they opened up an email, they gave me a call. I can tell maybe I forgot to follow up and call them, right? And that's really helpful to know, because it's hard to keep track of all these things, especially as your business is growing. And if you have tools that are available, like, I definitely try and use it. Even building some automatic reminders for yourself, and just kind of some homegrown stuff around saying, I know, like, Gmail, this is a lifesaver for me. Gmail automatically puts a reminder if I've received an email and I haven't responded to it in 5 days or so. And it's like, oh my God, I completely missed that. Things like that can basically relate to the relationship that you have with a customer, and is part of CRM. And then the final thing is, obviously, if you can utilize a software, it could be something you sort of hack together yourself, but ideally a CRM, because there's so many great options out there that are incredibly affordable, if not just completely free, to automatically track these engagements. It's going to make your life way easier, and it's going to save you a lot of time. Otherwise, this whole process can feel a little bit like a bunch of extra homework and a bunch of extra work that doesn't, might not have an immediate payoff, right? But if you can start to do it a little bit more automatically, and just from the way that you interact and the way that you engage, then you'll reap all the benefits of it with a significantly less lower amount of time invested. So even that, if that's just exporting the emails that you have from customers, or grouping it in a certain way, and having a macro in Excel or something, those are all ways to do it. And the final kind of fundamental component is this idea of management. So how do you build on knowing your customers, knowing the way that they've engaged with you, and the way that what your relationship, quote unquote, looks like with them? How can you actually manage that relationship and manage that experience? And the way that you might do that is actually building a sales process, or a marketing process, or a lead process, and thinking through what does the ideal journey for a customer look like, and what, from my experience or expertise or data, points to this ideal sort of journey through, and build some process around that, right? How can you make sure that even just having a checklist for yourself of things that you want to go through and ways that you want to engage, and if they send an email, then I want to make sure I send them a response, and then I want to call them a few days later to check up, right? And then I want to send them a follow-up maybe a week later, right? Anything that you can build out to sort of take all of the energy and effort of managing every single one of your customers in your head, and into a system and into a process that could even eventually be put into a tool like a CRM software, and automated, is going to go a long way for controlling this kind of experience that we talked about earlier around your customers, right? So this is where you really start to take all of the information and data that you collected on your customers and hone it into sort of refining what this experience looks like, from the way that you market to them and who you market to the way that you interact with them, for the first time and are trying to convert them, from the way that you even sell to them and provide that product or service, and then how you follow up with them later. Now that you have the customer information in place and the relationship information in place, you should have a full kind of view of all the ways they interact, and you can start to exert some control of, what do I want this to look like, right? So maybe I'm not where I want to be today, but at least in the future, what do I want that to look like, right? And even, going to the extent of mapping out, what is a customer's journey if they're, interacting with me, and maybe taking a candid look and say, like, what are the pain points that they might have, or feedback that I've received from them before along that journey that I really should try and kind of find a solution for, or try and eliminate, so that this can be much smoother. And that's going to have an impact in terms of the number of leads that you can convert to customers, the retention of your current customers into loyal and recurring customers, all of that, the effectiveness of your marketing, all of that can be helped by trying to apply some structure to the way that you interact with your customers and the journey that they're going through. So even as something as simple as developing a basic sales process, right? You could say, I have cold leads, I have warm leads. I'm going to treat those a little bit differently. They become prospects, and then maybe they become like highly qualified, potential buyers. And each of those things drive different activities that you're going to engage with them, sort of based on your experience and expertise and data, right? And you can begin doing that just from the information you have, in an Excel sheet, about your customers and your interactions. It just requires some creativity and time on your side to sort of, write this out and scope it out. And then, just like a business, a business plan or a business model, when you first do it, it's just your best guess, right? It's just your best view of what, you think it should be, and you'll continue to refine it over time, and you'll get better, and you'll kind of codify it into systems. And that's where, if you can develop a process around this and sort of codify it either into templates or systems or even tools and applications, you can then begin to scale it. And that's, I think a big area of struggle for certain small businesses. You may be doing well and growing, but all of a sudden, once you start hiring people, it's difficult to maintain the same level of quality across all aspects of your business because you might not have as much direct control, right? And so having a system that you can sort of build in your expectations of quality assurance and control and sort of scripts and processes into that, and it's not going to be perfect, of course, but it will go a long way to taking the burden of scaling your business and growing it, off of your shoulders directly, and your anxiety, and putting it into something that is kind of intended to help do that. So kind of as you see, the third bullet there is like codifying your business rules and expectations in a way that you can sort of train and scale to the rest of your team members. I just realized I've been completely missing the Q&As. So let me just take a look at this real quick. Yeah, so there's a great question on customer experience and user experience, and I'm actually very close to user experience in a ton of what I do. That's a whole other bucket in and of itself, but I think incredibly important. And especially for something around, a software or a service that you're providing online or an e-commerce site, the actual user experience represents a large portion of this kind of broader customer experience, right? So the way that they can navigate your site, how easy it is to, reach out and post in a live chat with an agent, all of that stuff is going to contribute to your customer experience for businesses that tend to be kind of more online and less in person. So that there's a ton of information and material that's out there, and it's really important. So I would recommend that you definitely look into that, and trust me, there's more than enough out there to sort of lose many hours of looking into, but it's all really, really good stuff. So let's see, another question. Yeah, so in the case of, there's a ton of automation that you can apply to just regular interactions, right? So if they tag you, on Twitter, if you want an automated response to come through, and a lot of CRMs can automate some of the basic, probably internal processes. But if you want automated sort of outbound processes as well, like an automatic email response or some type of process that triggers when something happens, you'll probably need to actually purchase either like a starter license for a little bit more of an advanced CRM or something along those lines. But some of the things that I built for large enterprises, ranged from basically build in incredibly complex and automated business processes all into a CRM, right? Like Salesforce, and it's definitely capable of doing that. But I would encourage you to think about, make sure you have the fundamentals down before you kind of push to doing some of this, more exciting stuff and fancy stuff around machine learning and analytics and all of that. But it definitely is out there if you're ready to take that step. Actually, it relates to this bonus block. I kind of hit it, in the initial part, but there's this idea: if you have all these foundational blocks in place, all of a sudden you now can start to kind of do things that can scale your business and take some of the manual effort out of managing a CRM. So like I mentioned, automating email responses or intake forms, or kind of even like you can have some analytics around automatically qualifying leads, right? Because maybe you're not in a position where you don't have enough leads, but maybe you have too many leads and you need to know how to spend your time, right? How can you use a model that's going to sort of tailor the leads that is pushed to the top of that list to be ones that are most likely to purchase from you? And you can use that by building analytic models off of the historical data of successful purchases and the profiles of those customers that have purchased in the past or didn't purchase, right? So all of those things are available to you once you have these foundational blocks in play. And this is where some of the really cool, really exciting stuff, I'm really fortunate that, this is what I get to do on a day-to-day basis, right? Is build some of this really cool functionality on customer relationship management software. But I want to reiterate that, having the foundation in place is really important, and having, good, business hygiene habits of kind of tracking all this information and maintaining it. All of that is completely necessary before you can sort of supercharge it with some of these cool features and functionality, to kind of bring your business to the next level, right? So identifying, what could you automate? What could you use as a template, again, for scaling across your business? What are, actual software, solutions, even for like robotic process automation that can automate, literally typing in a customer's information and sending it and triggering a new record and all of this stuff. It's definitely out there for you to explore, but there's a lot there. And so I would get kind of the basics down and then start looking into one or two things that are probably going to drive a lot of impact for you. And it really relates to the level of maturity and kind of where your needs are as a business, right? And it sounded like most of the folks on the call either were aware of what a CRM was, but maybe didn't have one in place, or didn't have maybe like a formal CRM in place, right? So you're somewhere between most people, it seems like, are in the second bucket. So it's kind of an ad hoc. It's a basic CRM, some customer data, some leads, et cetera, but probably not a well-defined process. And I was hoping that most of the people on the call were somewhere between 1 and 3, because if you're in 4 and 5, I've probably completely bored you to death. You know this inside and out. But it's a journey of getting there, right? So your level of maturity is going to determine what types of tools you use and how you're going to use a CRM to actually drive business value for your business, right? And so getting into that, so I guess I'll kind of start to close on this, and then we can focus more on questions. I know we're coming up at the top of the hour. So there's a ton of CRM software that's out there that for the most part is completely free for a reduced kind of set of functionality, or even the main functionality of a CRM, but for a limited number of users, right? So I put kind of a scale of the different CRMs that are available, from as simple as like something like Google Sheets or Excel, although I would recommend Google Sheets because then it's not saved directly to your PC, and you can access it from your phone, and you can access it from another device or in the office or whatever it is, right? And so the template that we'll provide, you could use it like this if you really just need to go from 0 to 1 here. But there's a bunch here as well, Bitrix24, Zoho CRM, HubSpot, and all of the ones on the bottom are actually CRM solutions as well, that I'm pretty sure 90% of them are also free, at least for a smaller set of users, right? And so most of them kind of provide all of the basic CRM functionality. Some of them provide some extra functionality as well around, let's say, marketing campaigns and email pushes, or integration into maybe some content management system. So integration into like, your POS system, or the way that you manage maybe contracts or documents if you're in a business that has contracts. And then there's something like Salesforce, which is, for a long time been the industry leader and gold standard for CRM. And it's what I, use most of the time when I'm building CRM solutions and sales transformations for large enterprises. But it can be incredibly expensive, really unbelievably expensive. It's amazing how much they're able to to charge for their product. And even down at the most basic level, sort of what they've created to be competitive with some of these other, more small business focused CRMs is still relatively expensive. I mean, $25 for a user, if it's just you, maybe that's manageable, but depending on how small or big your business are, that might be, a good chunk of your marketing budget, right? So I would recommend check out any of these free software, that's available first. I'm hoping that it meets your needs. Each of them really just have different flavors. Some tend to be more simple, some tend to be a little bit more kind of flashy and more of like a task manager. So I would encourage you to explore all of this, but I would highly recommend, don't pay for a CRM, especially when you're starting out. Use something that's free, especially if it's just you. And if you have a bigger team, then maybe you can sort of scale it up and look into an introductory CRM and package. But there's a ton out there for you to use. And I think you can apply all of the practices that we talked about today, through a CRM, and it's going to, be really valuable for you. Obviously, there's much more to learn, but hopefully this is a good, starting point for that.
And Derek, I'm guessing that probably these organizations will do demos with businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll do demos, or, I mean, the fact that, it's free and you don't even need to put a card or anything, they kind of just say, hey, like, just create an account and watch our video. And if you want to use it, just create an account. And if you don't like it, then delete your account. Right. So, but for paid ones, definitely, I think you could get demos if you wanted to look a little bit more into, what.
So with some of the free ones that you mentioned, does it become less free after a certain number of people, or number of data or something like that?
Yeah, so a lot of time, now with cloud data so accessible, fortunately, they don't restrict it based on, the data that you use. I mean, unless you're like uploading, movies or like videos and stuff, right, to your CRM. Most of the time, data won't be a limitation, but the number of users that you can have for free might be, right? And obviously, the functionality is the main limiting factor here. But if you're going from nothing, or you're going from an Excel sheet, there's a lot that is going to be even, all new for you in terms of functionality. So if you have a big team, you might want to use one of these that says, provides functionality for unlimited, free users. But if you have a pretty small, team, or if it's just you, then you can probably use one like Zoho, for example, that it's free for life, as long as, you just have less than 3 users sort of in your organization. And there's a question here that says, what's the difference between integration and marketing? So yeah, so I would highly encourage you to kind of do some research. There's a lot of great articles out there comparing the different CRMs. In this case, so I'll explain this a little bit more. So Bitrix 24 has all of the basic CRM functionality, like leads and contacts, and being able to track orders and engagement, but it doesn't have any functionality around marketing or campaigns, or like such as email campaigns, right? But it is free for as many users as you want. In the case of Zoho, it has all of the CRM functionality, plus marketing functionality for pushing out emails, but it's only free for up to 3 users. And in the case of what it's missing is integrations, in terms of potential integrations into your point of sale system, or integrations into something like Google Drive, if you track notes and everything in there, or if you have files or folders for different customers or contracts. Some of these other CRMs might not have integrations to those. I know HubSpot does have integrations that are available as part of the free license. So hopefully that answers your question as to sort of what's included. And I will comment, this is not a full comparison list. I would recommend you look into it further, because there are, nuances in the level of functionality. But if you're, at a 1 or a 2 in that maturity, I think any of these are going to meet your needs in terms of taking the next step for CRM. Yeah, and then actually, so that question, and Jamie, I saw you answered it. Like, do you need to have a website in order to use a CRM? You do not need to have a website in order to use a CRM. In fact, some CRMs actually provide like a landing page or a little bit of a mini website for you. Even in the free versions that you can use. So if you don't have a website and you want one, and you don't have to worry about going through something like Squarespace, Squarespace. Some of these CRMs, I did notice one of their features is that they have a customer facing page that they can access. It probably won't have like e-commerce functionality, but it would have basic information around your business, and hours and products and services that are available. So I would recommend you look into that as well. And happy to answer any other questions here as well, or Jamie, if you have one, or things you might think people are interested in hearing.
Derek, is this our last slide, just for
Yep,
context?
this is our last slide. I just had a page on questions, but I could
Okay.
also, flip back to anything that we've already seen before.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. Yeah, so now is a good time. Put your questions. Easiest place is the Q&A if you can. If not, put them in the chat. I'll give everyone a minute. I'm also going to include some links that I mentioned right now. So the first one will be the resource page that I mentioned, and it will have registration links for some of our upcoming sessions. I know there was some interest, it seemed, in the Q&A about websites, so some people might not have websites yet. We do have upcoming webinars on that. We did one last week, and we should be doing one again probably next month, so that's something to look out for. So put that in the chat right now. Did you get to all the questions so far in the Q&A, Derek?
I think I answered them on the chat, but actually we have more coming in, so I'm just trying to write some responses as well. So
yes.
Yep. So there's a lot about so there's a question here about integrating online marketing and social media campaigns into one spot. So it's a great question, and it's something that's a little bit more of an advanced functionality. So what I would recommend that you do is look for CRMs that have that functionality built in natively, or at the very least if you're managing your social media analytics or sort of like Google Analytics or website analytics somewhere else. Just make sure that they have an integration into wherever you're managing it, so that you can pull the information into the CRM, so that it can then be associated to your customers. But a lot of CRMs have social media analytics and marketing campaign analytics built right in. You just need to make sure you find one that has it. And of course, if you're willing to pay for a CRM, there's a bunch that will do it. If you're looking for one that's free, you might have to dig a little bit more. But there's definitely things out there like HubSpot or Zoho.
And I'll add, if that is a topic that interests you, on October 7th, we'll be doing a presentation with Google on using data to help drive your marketing. So that could be a nice follow-up to this presentation today. So as you can see, I just posted our resource page in the chat. We update that almost daily. And I also posted our survey. So our center is funded in part by the federal government, the Small Business Administration, and we're required to take surveys for our trainings like this, so we can make sure that we can keep offering free trainings for you. So we'd appreciate that you fill that out. We'll also be sending it again when we send out the follow-up material. So please do complete that for us. Oh, good. We're getting some good feedback in the chat. And we know we're a little over the 1 hour mark. I think we budgeted an hour and a half for this. So if you need to leave for the day, please go ahead, enjoy your afternoon. Do fill out that survey before you go. But we'll keep this open for a little bit just to do the Q&A. But if you have to go, no problem.
Yeah, apologize for running over. I was just too excited to cover all this information for everyone. So. Yeah, so a few of the questions that are still open. So recommendations on like data columns and something like Excel. In the template, we've actually included that. Yeah, it covers exactly what you're saying. Name, date of birth, email address. Maybe the type of interaction, the type of customer, whether they're a prospect or a paying customer, or maybe a cold prospect. All that stuff. So we put some thinking into the template that I think Jamie's going to send out after the call.
Yeah, so we did have some questions about recording slides, follow-up material. That will all be sent out to all attendees. So you will get recording and slides and that template that we mentioned that you can totally customize. And we hope that that's a really helpful way for you to start. So yeah, we're excited to share that. It's something that I've done individually with clients and then just catered it for their specific needs. But it's just nice to start with something and have that framework that you can then edit. So we are looking forward to sharing that with you and hope it can be helpful. And that's also something that you can take to your consultant. So remember, like I mentioned earlier, we have our consultants at the SBDC who are able to meet with you. We can talk about marketing. We can talk about your overall business plan, your growth plan, your pivot plan. But the more pre-work you do, the more materials you bring to them, the better they can work with you. So you can say, hey, been working on a CRM, wanted to go over this with you. Totally appropriate. You can do that with your consultant at our office. So we have a question about